Brian Kelly confirms defensive tackle Sydir Mitchell no longer on the LSU roster. So what happened and how does it affect LSU moving forward? We're talking about it Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe as always. One of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. LSU is down a defensive tackle just 2 weeks into the season. On Tuesday evening, Shea Dixon from On3, the Bengal Tiger, was the first to report that Sydir Mitchell, the transfer from Texas, is no longer with the LSU football program, not listed on the roster, and a source confirmed to him that Mitchell is no longer with the team. Well, Wednesday morning, Brian Kelly was on the SEC coaches teleconference and confirmed that Mitchell is no longer with the team, but added another piece that has a lot of raising a lot of eyebrows.
There are standards, right? I mean, I can confirm that he is no longer on the roster, but we have standards that need to be met, and those standards weren't met. Like any business or organization, you have workplace standards, and so those standards weren't met, and really that's all I'm going to talk about relative to Sydir because he's no longer with us.
That is a little jarring to hear it that way, because there's one part of this that makes a lot of sense, okay? When we look at Sydir Mitchell and his contribution to this team, it makes sense why he would no longer be with LSU. Like, just follow this path, if you would, okay? So Sydir Mitchell, as a high school athlete, committed to sign with Texas and then Texas defensive line coach Bo Davis. He played for Bo Davis in Austin. Well, Bo Davis leaves Texas, comes to LSU, and then when Mitchell enters the transfer portal, he signs with LSU in the December portal window last year. Well, before spring practice, we all know Bo Davis leaves LSU for a job with the New Orleans Saints. And LSU then subsequently hires Kyle Williams. And this is not new, especially if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this, but there is a very obvious contrast stylistically in what Bo Davis wants in his defensive lineman and what Kyle Williams wants in his defensive lineman. Just look at the guys Bo Davis recruited. Sydir Mitchell is 6'5", 360. You can look at guys like Brandon Brown and Zion Williams and Buddy Mathis, all the guys from this most recent signing class that Bo Davis signed. They're all dudes that are 330 to 360 pounds. They're massive, space-eating defensive tackles. And Bo Davis wanted those big, space-eating guys that played with good technique and created like pileups right in the middle, like car crash pileups right in the middle of the offensive and defensive line to free up the linebackers to go make plays. Think more of a prototypical 3-4 defense, like the defenses that Nick Saban thrived in Alabama for all those years with those giant defensive linemen that nobody could move, like Ashawn Robinson and Jaron Reed and Terrence Cody, all the way back to Terrence Cody. Think those guys, right? That's what Bo Davis was recruiting. One freshman, Dylan Battle, remember, who's out of Arlington, Texas, signed with LSU only when LSU wasn't on him. Only when Bo Davis got the LSU job did LSU extend the offer, and Battle signed with LSU to play for Bo Davis. As soon as Bo Davis took the Saints job, Dylan Battle never showed up on campus. He's now at the University of Utah. So stylistically, it's different. The best example of this contrast are the two defensive line transfers. Bo Davis in the December portal window brought in Sydir Mitchell, 6'5", 360. Kyle Williams in the spring portal window brings in Bernard Gooden, 6'1", 268. One guy is a gigantic space eater. The other guy is a small, fast, agile, explosive, get up the field and create havoc type defensive lineman, like Kyle Williams was. Kyle is recruiting and coaching defensive linemen sort of in his image. So you look at a guy like Ahmad Bro, for example, from Ruston, who played at Ruston for Kyle Williams. Makes a lot of sense about the direction they're going to be going moving forward. We talked about Deuce Gerald, who LSU got committed out of the Atlanta area. Fits the mold of what Kyle Williams wants on the defensive line. So if you'd told me that Sydir Mitchell was no longer going to be with the LSU program. That's not a great surprise. The fact that it happened 2 games into the season is a little bit of a surprise. But dig a little bit deeper here. And this starts to tell the story. So through 2 games, LSU, if you look at the defensive line snap count through 2 games, okay, Mathis, Brown, McKinley, Bro, Washington, Gooden, Guillory. 7 interior defensive tackles have played. That's not counting the ends. That's 7 tackles, which tells you that Sydir Mitchell was at best your 8th guy in this rotation. So he realistically was not going to play this year. So naturally, you can say it's not a surprise that Sydir Mitchell is no longer with the team because he's going to enter the transfer portal and go find someplace that makes more sense for him to get on the field. When you look at these snap counts, for example, at defensive line, at tackle, Bernard Gooden has played 66 defensive snaps. Dom McKinley has played 47 defensive snaps. Jacobian Guillory's played 42. Ahmad Bros played 37. Mathis has played 16. Brandon Brown's played 10. And then Sean Washington's played 3. That's your 7 defensive linemen in their snap count. So really your rotation primarily is 4 guys right now. So for Mitchell, he leaves, goes in the portal, goes to a place that naturally that's going to make more sense for him. It certainly would have made more sense for him to do it after the season, unless if he wasn't going to play at all this year. But there's always the possibility he could get on the field for more than 4 games and lose a redshirt year. So in any event, Sydir Mitchell now is no longer here. But the Brian Kelly cut about standards is the one that's a little jarring right there, because it makes you wonder, and there's no more information. I haven't been able to gather anything more than confirmation that LSU did run him off, that LSU removed him. He didn't leave. LSU removed him from the team. And I didn't get any explanation as to why. But, I can remember going back to Brian Kelly's introductory press conference. He was asked about Kayshon Boutte. It's hard to remember back to the time, but Boutte was obviously sensational as a freshman in the COVID year, and then was having a fantastic 2021. He suffered the injury at Kentucky, and then Ed Ogeron was fired. Kelly comes in. I remember that introductory press conference. Brian Kelly was asked about Kayshon Boutte, and he said, "Well, I know his name." It's about the extent of the relationship they had at that point. And he talked so much about Kayshon wanting to do the right things and creating good habits and things along those lines, and Brian Kelly instituting all those standards and culture. And that's something that has been paramount for this program with Brian Kelly, literally from the day he showed up. I remember when he first showed up, every player had accountability cards. They had to write down what time they went to bed, they went to class, what they ate. I mean, the analogy I always gave, it's like, remember when you're in school, like when you're in kindergarten, first grade, you're elementary school, when it's lunchtime, you walk single file, like with your finger over your mouth, like shush, hand in the air. You walk single file to the cafeteria, and you sit in the same seat every time because you need that structure and order and organization. When you get to high school, it's, the bell rings, it's lunch, go eat your lunch. When you get to college, figure it out, just get some food when you can, right? But the older you get, the more responsibility that you're going to have and the less standard and structure, because you don't need it, because you're expected to be more responsible. I think it's the same thing within Brian Kelly's program. When he first got here, there was a lot of structure because guys needed it, and now he's built that culture, and they have good locker room culture. And you've seen that evident by this team bringing in 15, 16 transfers that have assimilated very nicely because you have great locker room culture with veteran guys like Nussmeier and Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks and West Weeks and Jordan Gilbert and so on. So that part of it, it makes a little bit of sense. I don't have any smoking gun that happened with Sydir Mitchell that caused him to be forced out of this program. But Brian Kelly said it, and I've confirmed it, that he was removed from the program, not leaving just because of lack of playing time. I think the stylistically, lack of playing time, and clearly some of the culture stuff are reasons why Sydir Mitchell is no longer on this football team. Now, what does that mean for the defensive line room moving forward? We'll run through some of that as we continue here. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda. You can just move through life, or you can find the things that move you. It's your choice. You can choose to get out there, choose your people. You can choose to go for it, really go for it. Just choose to do something that moves you. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. Mazda. Move and be moved. We're also brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. So let's break it down. For the LSU Tigers, Barian Brown delivered in a big way. Of course, he was LSU's leading receiver on Saturday night against Louisiana Tech. So good that Brian said he, quote, balled out. Brian Kelly said he balled out. When the pressure was on, Barian Brown came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance was no fluke. And just like Barian Brown delivered for the LSU Tigers, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday on your order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. And we're also brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your personal accounts in minutes. You can see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally, feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can identify that you aren't saving as much as you thought. Monarch will help you notice inefficient investment allocations and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs, things like that. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. So Sydir Mitchell no longer with the LSU football program. It is important now to look at the numbers at defensive tackle and how that absence is going to affect LSU. Keep in mind, when you look at the LSU roster as it stands right now at defensive tackle, you're going to lose after this season your two seniors who are going to be out of eligibility. So Jacobian Guillory is obviously a 6-year player, had the red shirt and the injury. He'll be out of eligibility. Then also Bernard Gooden, the senior transfer from South Florida, will be out of eligibility as well. So you're losing those two guys. So you're down those two, and then naturally you've already lost now Sydir Mitchell as well. It will be interesting what happens with Sean Washington from New Orleans, who started his career at Georgia, transferred to LSU, and it just hasn't really materialized for Washington. He's a redshirt junior, so he's a 4th-year junior. He can play next season for a 5th year at LSU. And remember, he did have a detour at East Mississippi Community College. So if, in fact, the Diego Pavia rule carries on, he could theoretically have 2 more years of college football. Hard to imagine them being part of the LSU defensive line rotation, but that's one worth watching. When you look at the rest of your tackles, Ahmad Bro and Dominic McKinley will be back next season for their junior years. They will be your starters. They will be your stalwarts. They will be your interior benchmark guys. And then you're really looking at this group of freshmen who might be able to step up. Buddy Mathis is the guy, and not surprisingly, when I tell you this in a second, who's maybe taken the biggest step. He was the first freshman to play. Actually saw a couple snaps against Clemson. Mathis is 6'2", 285. What did we talk about with what Kyle Williams wants? Well, Mathis, 6'2", 285, more fits the mold of a Kyle Williams defensive tackle than, say, someone like Zion Williams, who the other freshman who's 6'4", 360. Now, Brandon Brown, 6'1", 295. Brown's the other one who played against Louisiana Tech this past weekend, still waiting for Zion Williams to get on the field. It's just an illustration of what Kyle Williams wants. So again, next year, you'll have back Bro and McKinley as your starters. Very likely the next 2 guys would be Brandon Brown and Buddy Mathis. There's 4. We'll wait and see what happens with Zion Williams and Sean Washington. So you could have as many as 6 right there returning, but 6 isn't enough. And when you just look at this year with Gooden, Bro, Guillory, Mathis Brown, Zion Williams, Sean Washington, Don McKinley. Then you did have Sydir Mitchell. So you had 9. So in theory, you're going to need more than the 6 you'll likely have back next year. And again, it could be less depending on what happens with Sean Washington and Zion Williams, who, as we've talked about here, don't really fit the mold of what Kyle Williams wants at defensive tackle. Now, this recruiting class is already one of the best in the country. Remember, you got Richard Anderson committed, who is the number 1 interior defensive lineman in the country. Now, he's a big one. He's 6'4", 350. But he's from New Orleans. He's a 5-star. He's the number 1 player in the country at his position. And that's one that you have to get. So how he fits will be interesting. You also have Deuce Gerald's committed. Gerald's 6'1", 268. Think Bernard Gooden. I mean, Deuce Gerald's is built in that mold. That was a big recruiting win that LSU got with Deuce Gerald's over Ole Miss, his dad's alma mater, and Oregon. But it's those 2 guys who are at the top of it. And you have some edge players as well committed. But those 2 guys on the defensive line, along with Darius McKinley, Dominic McKinley's younger brother, who's 6'3", 270, are the 3 you have committed. So to work through the numbers, the 6 that could return next year, but we'll see about Sean Washington and Zion Williams. So that 6 could maybe be 4. You've got 3 freshmen coming in, which gets you back to 7. What happens with those 2 guys I mentioned will determine if you feel like you have to go into the transfer portal for defensive tackle, and if you just need depth, or if you need starting caliber pieces to complement Bro and McKinley. But Bro, McKinley will be your first 2. Mathis and Brown likely are right there as well. And then a really highly regarded freshman class coming in with Anderson and Gerald's. They'll have to supplement at defensive tackle in the portal. And remember, the NCAA has agreed to 1 portal window now. So when you get into that now early January portal window, it's when LSU is going to have to make those decisions about what they're going to do at defensive tackle in every position. And remember, no spring portal window anymore. It's where LSU got Bernard Gooden and AJ Halsey this year. No spring portal window anymore means you've got to anticipate what might happen after spring as well. So your roster, in theory, is going to be your roster coming out of that January portal window. Tigers will certainly be looking at defensive tackle. All right, that's going to do it for us here in today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. Hey, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day. It's Locked On LSU, your team every day.